I am sitting on the 47th floor, seconds away from signing a deal valuing my company at $1.9 billion, when I see my mother and twin on TV. They are boasting about the scholarship that changed my sister's life. But there is one problem. That scholarship was mine. Tonight at their gala, I am giving them the undeniable truth. Stay tuned, because the moment I watch them pay is something you won't predict. My name is Karina Westbrook, and I am 29 years old. From where I sat on the 47th floor of the Skyline Tower, the city of San Francisco looked like a circuit board, a sprawling grid of energy and light that I understood far better than I understood people. The air in the conference room was recycled and chilled to a precise 68 degrees, a temperature meant to keep minds sharp and negotiations brisk. On the mahogany table in front of me lay a stack of documents thick enough to serve as a doorstop. These papers represented the culmination of 7 years of sleepless nights, missed holidays, and relentless grinding. They were the final acquisition papers for Alderline Systems, the supply chain logistics company I had built from a laptop in a rented room into a global powerhouse. In less than 20 minutes, I was scheduled to pick up a fountain pen and sign my name. Once the ink dried, the press would announce that Alderline Systems had been valued at $1.9 billion. It was the kind of money that altered reality. It was the kind of validation that was supposed to fix everything. I spun my chair away from the window and toward the sleek, flat-screen television mounted on the far wall. I had asked my executive assistant, Elena, to turn it on to a business news channel so I could monitor the market sentiment before the signing. But the channel had cut away to a breaking lifestyle segment, a puff piece covering a high-profile education gala taking place across the country in Stonegate City, Virginia. I reached for the remote to mute it, but my hand froze in midair. The camera zoomed in on a woman with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a smile that looked practiced enough to be trademarked. Standing next to her was a younger woman, her mirror image, dressed in a shimmering emerald gown that caught the flash of the paparazzi cameras. It was my mother, Marla Westbrook, and standing next to her, looking like the epitome of grace and unearned success, was my twin sister, Delaney. I felt the blood drain from my face, pooling somewhere in my feet. The sensation was not unlike the drop of a roller coaster, a sudden, sickening lurch of gravity. I should have turned it off. I should have thrown the remote through the screen. Instead, I pressed the volume up button. "It is truly an honor," Marla was saying into the microphone, her voice trembling with a fabricated emotion that only I could recognize as performance art. "We are here to support the Hawthorne Merit Scholarship because we know, firsthand, how a single letter can change a destiny. When my daughter, Delaney, received that full scholarship 11 years ago, it was the proudest moment of my life. She worked so hard. She overcame so much." Delaney nodded demurely, dabbing at the corner of her eye with a manicured finger. "I just want to give back," my sister said, her voice soft and breathless. "That scholarship was my lifeline. It gave me a future when we didn't think we could afford one. I owe everything to that opportunity." The room spun. My breath caught in my throat, a jagged shard of air that refused to go down. The lie was so bold, so audacious, that for a second, I wondered if I had suffered a stroke. I gripped the armrests of my leather chair until my knuckles turned white. They were rewriting history on national television. They were taking the single most painful, transformative trauma of my youth, the theft of my future, and wearing it like a piece of jewelry. That scholarship was not Delaney's. Delaney had barely passed pre-calculus. Delaney had spent her senior year planning prom themes and curating her social media presence while I worked double shifts at a diner and studied until my eyes burned. The Hawthorne Merit Scholarship was mine. The essay was mine. The grades were mine. The interview, where I sat before a panel of 3 academics and poured out my soul about supply chain optimization and logistical frameworks, was mine. But 11 years ago, the letter that came to our house did not say congratulations. The letter Marla handed me said, "We regret to inform you." I watched them on the screen. These 2 women who shared my DNA, but none of my soul, They looked radiant. They looked wealthy. They looked like the heroes of a story that I had bled to write. The door to the conference room opened with a soft click. I did not turn around. I could not tear my eyes away from the screen. Karina. It was Elena. Her voice was hesitant. She was holding a tablet against her chest, sensing the sudden drop in atmospheric pressure within the room. The legal team is assembling in the hallway. They are ready for the signing. And, I have a weird update from the PR department. I finally blinked, forcing myself to look away from Marla's face. I swiveled the chair around. My expression must have been terrifyingly blank because Elena took a half step back. "What is it?" I asked. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat and metallic. Elena glanced down at her tablet, scrolling nervously. "It is a coincidence, considering what is on the TV. The organizers of that gala in Stonegate City, the Education for Tomorrow event, they just reached out to our public relations head. Apparently, they heard the rumor about the valuation news dropping today. They want to know if Alderline Systems would be interested in coming on board as a last-minute headline sponsor." I stared at her. The universe was not just laughing at me, it was handing me a loaded gun and asking if I knew how to aim. "They want us to sponsor," I repeated. "Yes," Elena said. "They said it would be a great synergy, a billion-dollar female CEO supporting the next generation of scholars. They even suggested you could fly out tonight and present the keynote award. They are pushing the local hero angle since you grew up a few towns over from Stonegate. They want you on stage." On stage, with them, my heart, which had been hammering against my ribs, suddenly slowed to a cold, rhythmic thud. "Tell the legal team to wait 5 minutes," I said. "Karina, the investors are—" "5 minutes, Elena." She nodded quickly and backed out of the room, closing the door. I stood up and walked over to the wall opposite the window. There was a piece of abstract art hanging there, a swirl of gray and black oils. I reached behind the frame and pressed my thumb against a biometric scanner hidden in the plaster. With a soft hiss, a small wall safe popped open. Inside, there were no stacks of cash, no diamonds, and no corporate secrets. There was only a single, slender manila folder. I took it out. The label on the tab was handwritten in black ink. The letter. I carried it to the massive conference table and set it down next to the billion-dollar contract. The contrast was stark. On one side, the future wealth, power, and undeniable success. On the other side, the past, a thin sheaf of papers that proved I was not crazy. I opened the folder. On top lay the photocopy of a rejection letter. I ran my finger over the date. I was 11 years old. I remembered the day Marla handed it to me. I remembered the look in her eyes, not pity, but a strange, hard satisfaction. The world isn't fair. "Karina," she had said, "you aim too high." Beneath the rejection letter was a second document, one I had uncovered years later through a forensic audit of my own life. It was a confirmation of acceptance from the Hawthorne Merit Committee. It was addressed to me, but the acceptance had been intercepted. The student ID number swapped, and the funding diverted. I looked back at the TV. The interview was ending. The anchor was beaming at Marla. "What a wonderful story," the anchor said. "A mother's love and a daughter's hard work." I felt a coldness settle over me, a glacial calm that was far more dangerous than the rage I had felt moments ago. For a decade, I had focused on building Alderline. I had told myself that success was the best revenge. I told myself that becoming a CEO, becoming a titan of industry, would silence the ghosts of Briar Hollow. I was wrong. Success does not silence ghosts. It just gives you the resources to hunt them down. The door opened again. This time it was Marcus, my internal counsel. He was a sharp man, cynical and observant. He looked at me, then at the frozen image on the TV, and finally at the old folder open on the desk. "Karina," Marcus said, stepping fully into the room. "The board is waiting. We have to sign. If we delay past 4 o'clock, the wire transfers won't clear until Monday, and the valuation could fluctuate." He paused, studying my face. "You look like you just saw a murder." No, I said, closing the folder with a deliberate snap. I just witnessed a theft. Are you okay? Marcus asked. He was not asking as a lawyer now. He was asking as a friend who had seen me work 18-hour days for 5 years straight. I looked him in the eye. I am fine, Marcus. I just remembered that I have an outstanding debt, and I think it is time to collect. I picked up the internal phone and dialed Elena's line. She picked up on the first ring. Yes, Karina. Call the organizers of the Stonegate Gala back, I said. My voice was steady, void of any tremor. Tell them Alderline Systems accepts their invitation. We will be the headline sponsor. Tell them to clear the schedule. I am coming to Virginia, and I will be making the keynote speech. Okay, Elena said, sounding surprised. I will arrange the jet. What is the budget for the sponsorship? Whatever they ask for, I said. Double it. I want the center stage. I want the microphone. And I want the Westbrook family front and center. I hung up the phone. Marcus raised an eyebrow. I thought you hated charity galas. You always say they are inefficient uses of capital. This isn't charity, I said. I picked up the golden fountain pen that was waiting for the billion-dollar contract. This is an audit. I looked at the acquisition papers. I signed my name, Karina Westbrook, with a flourish. The ink was dark and permanent. Tonight, I would walk into that gala. I would not scream. I would not make a scene in the traditional sense. I would not throw wine or pull hair. I was a CEO of a publicly traded company, and I operated with precision. I looked at the folder one last time before sliding it into my briefcase. Marla and Delaney wanted a story about a scholarship fine. I would give them one. I would stand on that podium, under the spotlight they craved so desperately, and I would read the truth. I would project the documents onto the 60-foot screen behind me. I would let the timestamps, the forged signatures, and the diverted bank routing numbers tell the story. I checked my watch. It was 2:00. The flight to Virginia was 5 hours. Let's go, I said to Marcus. I have a plane to catch. I walked toward the door, leaving the view of the city behind me. The climb to the top had been lonely, but the view from the bottom, where I was about to send my mother and sister, was going to be crowded. They had stolen the beginning of my life. I was about to write the end of theirs, to understand why I am flying across the country to dismantle my own family. You have to understand the ecosystem of the Westbrook house in Briar Hollow, North Carolina. It was a beautiful house on the outside, a white 2-story colonial with black shutters and a manicured lawn that my father, Gordon, spent every Saturday morning tending to with the devotion of a monk. But inside, the air was always thin, as if there was only enough oxygen for one person to breathe freely. And in our house, that person was never me. We were 18 years old. We were twins. To the casual observer at the grocery store or the gas station, Delaney and I were identical. We shared the same high cheekbones, the same ash blonde hair, and the same pale blue eyes. But Marla, my mother, had a way of looking at us that stripped away the biology and assigned us roles that were as rigid as cast iron. Delaney was the star. She was the protagonist of the Westbrook family movie. I was the crew. I was the one who held the boom mic, adjusted the lighting, and made sure the set didn't collapse, all while staying carefully out of the frame. It wasn't that Marla was outright cruel to me in a way that would alert a social worker. She didn't beat me. She didn't starve me. Her abuse was far more sophisticated. It was a slow drip feed of diminishment. If Delaney got an A- on a history paper, Marla would tape it to the refrigerator and call her a genius. If I came home with a perfect score on an advanced placement calculus exam, Marla would glance at it and say, "That is good, Karina, but don't let it go to your head. You have always been the practical one. You need to focus on skills that will get you a steady job." The word practical was her favorite weapon against me. In Marla's vocabulary, practical meant unremarkable. It meant I was designed for labor, while Delaney was designed for leisure. My father, Gordon, was a ghost in his own home. He was a kind man, in the way a doormat is kind because it offers a soft place to wipe your feet. He worked long hours at a local insurance firm and came home with his shoulders slumped. retreating to the den to watch baseball with the volume turned low. Whenever Marla would launch into one of her tirades, usually about money, or status, or how the neighbors were judging us, Dad would just shrink. If I tried to defend myself, if I tried to point out the blatant favoritism, he would pull me aside later, his eyes pleading, "Don't upset your mother." "Karina," he would whisper, "she wants the best for you. Just keep the peace." So I did. I kept the peace by taking extra shifts at the hardware store on weekends to pay for my own textbooks, while Marla bought Delaney a new wardrobe for every season. I kept the peace by doing the laundry and the dishes, while Delaney spent hours on the phone, cultivating her popularity. I learned early on that if I wanted anything in life, I had to build it myself, brick by brick, in the silence of my bedroom after everyone else had gone to sleep. That was where the Hawthorne Merit Scholarship came in. It was the golden ticket. The Hawthorne Foundation offered a full-ride scholarship to Redwood Crest University, a prestigious private college 3 hours away. Redwood Crest had one of the best business and logistics programs in the country. It was expensive, exclusive, and completely out of my parents' price range. Marla had already made it clear that there was no college fund. Money is tight. She had told us over a dinner of meatloaf and green beans. "You girls will have to figure it out." But I knew she didn't mean Delaney. Delaney assumed things would work out for her because they always did. I, on the other hand, knew that my only way out of Briar Hollow, my only way out of being the practical shadow, was that scholarship. I treated the application process like a military operation. While Delaney was out at bonfires or planning the homecoming dance, I was in my room, surrounded by index cards and draft essays. I researched the board of directors of the Hawthorne Foundation. I analyzed their past winners. I realized they didn't just want smart students, they want problem solvers. They wanted people who could look at a chaotic system and find the order within it. I spent 3 months writing my essay. It wasn't about saving the world in a generic sense. It was about the hardware store where I worked. I wrote about reorganizing the inventory system to reduce waste by 15%. I wrote about the beauty of efficiency, how logistics was a language of care because getting resources to the right place at the right time could save lives. When I submitted the application, I didn't tell anyone, not even Dad. It felt too fragile, too precious to expose to the caustic air of our house. Then came the invitation for the interview. It arrived on a Tuesday. I remember the date perfectly. I had beaten Marla to the mailbox that day. A rare victory. I saw the thick envelope with the Hawthorne crest, and my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I hid it in my backpack and opened it in the bathroom at school. "We are pleased to invite you to the final round." The interview was held in a glass-walled conference room in Charlotte. I had to lie to Marla to get there. I told her I was picking up an extra shift at the store. Instead, I put on my only blazer a thrift store found that I had tailored myself late at night and drove the family minivan 2 hours east. I was terrified when I walked into that room. There were 3 people on the panel, a stern-looking professor with wire-rimmed glasses, a female CEO of a regional bank, and a representative from the university. They had my file in front of them. For the first 20 minutes, I was stiff. I gave the rehearsed answers I thought they wanted. But then, the professor asked me a question that wasn't on my flashcards. "Miss Westbrook, if you could change one thing about the way your high school operates, strictly from an operational standpoint, what would it be?" I forgot to be nervous. I forgot about Marla and Delaney and the stifling house in Briar Hollow. I just started talking. I broke down the inefficiency of the cafeteria supply line. I talked about the bus routes and how they wasted fuel by overlapping in 3 specific zones. I mapped it out in the air with my hands. I felt alive. I felt intelligent. When I finished, there was silence in the room. I thought I had blown it. I thought I had been too boring, too practical. Then, the female CEO smiled. It wasn't a polite smile. It was a genuine, impressed grin. "We like how you think, Karina," she said. "You see the world differently." I drove home floating on a cloud. For the first time in 18 years, someone had looked at my practicality and called it a superpower, not a limitation. I allowed myself to imagine it walking across the campus at Redwood Crest. sitting in lecture halls, meeting people who didn't know I was supposed to be the lesser twin. I imagined a life where my name stood alone, without the prefix Delaney's sister. But the moment I walked through the front door, the atmosphere crushed me back down. Marla was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with aggressive, sharp movements. Delaney was sitting at the counter, flipping through a magazine. "Where have you been?" Marla asked without looking up. "You are late. The shift ended an hour ago." "Traffic," I lied, clutching my bag where the interview invitation was hidden. "There was a wreck on the highway," Marla hummed, a low sound of disapproval. "Well, set the table. Your sister is tired. She had cheer practice." I looked at Delaney. She didn't look tired. She looked bored and radiant, but I didn't argue. I set the table. I ate my dinner. I washed the dishes. I kept the secret of the interview burning inside me like a small, warm coal. The waiting was the hardest part. The committee had told me that decision letters would be mailed out in 2 weeks, 14 days. During those 2 weeks, the dynamic in the house became even more suffocating. It was as if Marla sensed that I was reaching for something beyond her grasp, and she instinctively tightened her grip. She became obsessive about the mail. In our house, the mailbox was Marla's domain. It was an unspoken rule, strictly enforced. The mail carrier arrived at 11 in the morning. Marla was always there to meet him. She would bring the stack of envelopes inside, sort them on the kitchen island, and distribute them as she saw fit. She claimed it was to prevent things from getting lost, to keep the bills organized, but even then, I knew it was about control. Information was power, and Marla wanted to be the gatekeeper of all information entering the Westbrook residence. I tried to beat her to it. I tried coming home for lunch during my break, but she was always there, watching the driveway. "What are you doing home?" "Karina," she would ask, her eyes narrowing. Checking up on me, I had to wait. I marked the date on the calendar in my room with a small, red dot. May 14th. That was the day the letter was supposed to arrive. I was so confident. I shouldn't have been. But the memory of that interview gave me a reckless hope. I did something embarrassing. Something I never told anyone. I wrote an acceptance speech. I wrote it in my journal, thanking my teachers, thanking the committee. I even wrote a line thanking my parents, trying to manifest a version of reality where they would be happy for me. "Thank you for believing in me." I wrote, "I won't let you down." The night before May 14th, the tension in the house was palpable. A storm was rolling in over the mountains, and the air pressure was dropping, making the windows rattle in their frames. We were in the kitchen, Marla, Delaney, and I. Gordon was hiding in the garage, tinkering with the lawnmower. Delaney was complaining about her prom dress fitting. "It is just too tight in the waist. Mom, I need to get it altered again." "We will take care of it, sweetie," Marla cooed. "You are going to be the most beautiful girl there." Then her gaze shifted to me. I was wiping down the counters, scrubbing at a stain that wasn't there. Marla watched me for a long moment. Her expression was unreadable, a mask of smooth, cold porcelain. "You seem anxious, Karina," she said. It wasn't a question. "I am fine," I said, keeping my eyes on the counter. "Just studying for finals." "You study too much," Marla said. She walked over to the refrigerator and poured herself a glass of iced tea. The ice cubes clinked against the glass, a sharp, jarring sound in the quiet kitchen. "You always have your head in the clouds, thinking if you work hard enough, the world will just hand you things." I stopped scrubbing. "Hard work is how you get things." "Mom," Marla laughed. It was a short, dry sound, devoid of humor. "Oh, honey, that is what they tell you in school, but the real world—" She took a sip of her tea, her eyes locking onto mine over the rim of the glass. "The real world is about who you know. It is about luck. It is about who likes you." She glanced at Delaney, who was oblivious to the undercurrent of the conversation, still looking at dress photos on her phone. Then Marla looked back at me. "Life isn't fair, Karina," she said softly. Her voice dropped an octave, becoming intimate and chilling. "You need to remember that. Some people are meant to shine, and some people are meant to help. Don't break your own heart trying to be something you are not. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the storm outside. It felt like a warning. It felt like she knew something I didn't. I am just trying to go to college. Mom, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I know, Marla said. She reached out and patted my cheek. Her hand was cold. And I am just trying to protect you from disappointment. She turned off the kitchen light, plunging the room into semi-darkness, illuminated only by the lightning flashing outside. Go to bed, girls. Big day tomorrow. I went to my room, but I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. I replayed her words over and over. Life isn't fair. I stared at the ceiling, clutching my blanket. I told myself she was just being Marla. I told myself that a panel of strangers in Charlotte had seen my worth, and their vote mattered more than hers. I told myself that tomorrow, the letter would come, and the ink on the page would be a shield that Marla couldn't penetrate. I didn't know then that the decision had already been made. I didn't know that fairness wasn't just an abstract concept Marla mocked, it was something she was actively planning to dismantle. As the clock ticked past midnight, ushering in the day that would ruin my life, I fell asleep dreaming of Redwood Crest, unaware that downstairs, in the mind of the woman sleeping down the hall, my future was already being rewritten. The mailbox stood at the end of our driveway like a sentry post, a rigid metal box on a wooden stake that marked the boundary between the safety of the outside world and the stifling regime of the Westbrook household. On the 14th of May, the day the decision was due to arrive, I spent the entire morning in a state of vibrating nausea. I watched the clock on the wall of my high school history class, counting down the seconds until the final bell rang at 3 o'clock. I drove home with my foot heavy on the gas pedal of our beat-up minivan. My plan was simple. I needed to get to that mailbox before Marla did. If I could just hold the envelope in my hands, if I could open it without her shadow looming over me, I felt I could handle whatever news was inside. If it was a rejection, I could mourn in private. If it was an acceptance, I could protect it before she found a way to diminish it. I pulled into the driveway at 3:20 in the afternoon. My heart sank. Marla was already there. She was standing on the front porch, her arms crossed over her chest, watching me get out of the car. In her right hand, she held a stack of mail. She looked like a gatekeeper guarding a fortress. I walked up the driveway, my backpack heavy on my shoulder. I tried to keep my face neutral, tried not to look at her hand, but my eyes betrayed me. "Is there anything for me?" I asked. My voice sounded thin, stripped of the confidence I had felt during the interview in Charlotte. Marla smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. It was a tight, muscular contraction of her lips. "Hello to you too, Karina," she said. She tapped the stack of envelopes against her palm. "There is a letter here from the Hawthorne Foundation." My breath hitched. "Can I have it?" "Not yet," she said, turning and walking back into the house. "I am going to hold on to it until your father gets home. We will open it together as a family. It is important that we support one another, regardless of the outcome." "But it is addressed to me," I argued, following her into the kitchen. "Mom, please, I need to know." She placed the mail on top of the refrigerator, well out of reach, and turned to face me. Her expression was one of practiced patience, the kind one uses with a toddler throwing a tantrum. "Patience is a virtue, Karina. If you are going to be an adult, you need to learn to wait. Go wash up. Set the table. We will deal with this at dinner." The next 3 hours were an exercise in psychological torture. I moved through the house like a ghost, peeling potatoes and folding napkins, while my eyes kept darting to the top of the refrigerator. Delaney came home an hour later, chatting loudly on her cell phone about a pool party, completely oblivious to the tension radiating off me. Marla hummed as she stirred a pot of chili, acting as if the piece of paper sitting 6 feet above her head did not hold the power to dismantle my entire universe. Finally, at 6:30, Gordon walked through the door. He looked tired, his tie loosened, carrying the weight of a mediocre day at the insurance office. "Dinner time," Marla announced brightly. We sat down. I could not eat. The smell of the chili made my stomach turn. I watched my father eat, watched Delaney pick at a piece of cornbread, and waited. When the plates were cleared, Marla stood up. The room went silent. She walked to the refrigerator, retrieved the envelope, and brought it to the table. She did not slide it across to me. She held it in her hand, fingering the flap. "We all know how much Karina wanted this," Marla began, her tone somber, like she was delivering a eulogy rather than a letter. "But before you open this, I want us to remember that reach and grasp are two different things. There is no shame in staying local." She handed me the envelope. It felt wrong immediately. I had spent months researching the Hawthorne Foundation. I knew they used thick, cream-colored linen stock for their official correspondence. I had seen samples on online forums. The envelope in my hand was standard white office supply paper. It felt light, flimsy. I tore it open. My hands were shaking so hard I almost ripped the letter inside. I unfolded the single sheet of paper. "Dear applicant, thank you for your interest in the Hawthorne Merit Scholarship. We regret to inform you that your application has not been selected for the upcoming academic year. The pool of candidates was highly competitive, and we have chosen to allocate our resources elsewhere. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. Sincerely, the Scholarship Committee." There was no signature, no specific name, no mention of my interview, or the supply chain project I had discussed with the CEO. It was a form letter, a generic brush-off. The air left my lungs. It felt as if someone had reached into my chest and turned off a switch. I stared at the words, "regret to inform you," until they blurred into black smudges. "Oh, Karina," Marla said. Her voice was dripping with a heavy, suffocating syrup of pity. "I am so sorry." I looked up. My mother was shaking her head, a look of vindication hidden deep in her eyes. "I tried to warn you. Didn't I? You set your sights on these big, fancy things, and the world just isn't built that way for people like us. We aren't lucky. Karina, we don't get the golden tickets." "But the interview," I whispered, my voice trembling. "They liked me. They said they liked how I thought." "People say things to be polite, honey," Marla said. Reaching out to cover my hand with hers, I flinched away. "They probably say that to everyone." I looked at my father. Gordon was staring at his placemat, unable to meet my gaze. He looked defeated, as if my failure was just another confirmation of his own mediocrity. "I don't understand," I said, looking back at the paper. "This doesn't look right. The paper it is cheap." "Don't be ungracious," Marla snapped, her tone hardening instantly. "Do not blame the paper because you didn't get the result you wanted. That is unbecoming." Before I could respond, the landline phone on the kitchen wall rang. Marla stood up immediately, as if she had been waiting for a cue. "I will get it." She walked over to the phone and lifted the receiver. "Hello, yes. This is Mrs. Westbrook." I watched her back. Her posture straightened. A gasp of theatrical delight escaped her lips. She turned around, her eyes wide, beaming not at me, but at Delaney. "Oh my goodness," Marla said into the phone. "Really?" "Yes. She is right here. Yes, of course. Thank you. Thank you so much." She hung up the phone and clasped her hands together, tears springing to her eyes. "That was the foundation," Marla announced, her voice trembling with excitement. "They said, oh, this is a miracle. They said they reviewed the files again. They were so impressed with the Westbrook family application that they decided to award the scholarship to Delaney." The silence that followed was absolute. I looked at Delaney. Her mouth was hanging open. "Me?" Delaney asked. "But I didn't even interview. I just sent in the basic application." "They said your essay on community spirit was moving," Marla lied smoothly. She walked over and hugged Delaney, burying her face in my sister's hair. "You did it. Lainey, you are going to Redwood Crest." I am," Delaney stammered, looking confused. but slowly beginning to smile as the praise washed over her. I got a scholarship. A full ride. Marla cheered. My little star. I sat frozen in my chair. The room was spinning. This was impossible. Delaney had written her essay the night before the deadline. I had proofread it. It was full of cliches about cheerleading and being yourself. There was no way a committee that grilled me on logistics algorithms would choose that essay over mine. Unless the files were swapped. Unless the Westbrook family application was a blur they didn't bother to distinguish. Wait, I said. I stood up, my legs feeling like jelly. Mom, that doesn't make sense. They don't just switch winners on the phone. And why didn't they ask to speak to Delaney? Marla pulled away from Delaney and turned on me. Her face was cold, stripped of all the maternal warmth she had just displayed. Are you jealous, Karina? The question hung in the air like a blade. No, I said, tears pricking my eyes. I am not jealous. I worked for this. I interviewed. Delaney didn't even want to go there. Lower your voice, Marla hissed. Your sister just received life-changing news, and you are trying to ruin it because your ego is bruised. I thought you were better than that. I thought you loved your sister. I do, but... Then sit down and congratulate her, Marla commanded. We are not going to let your bitterness spoil this night. I looked at Gordon. Dad, does this make sense to you? Gordon looked up, his eyes watery and sad. He looked at Marla, who was glaring at him with the intensity of a laser. Then he looked at me. Karina, he said softly, your mother is right. We should be happy for Delaney. Maybe it is for the best. For the best, I repeated, my voice cracking. You are the strong one, Gordon said. It was a phrase he had used my whole life, a compliment that was actually a cage. You can handle disappointment, Delaney. She needs a win. She needs help. You know that. I stared at him. He was trading my future for peace in his kitchen. He was sacrificing me because I was resilient enough to survive the fall, while Delaney was the fragile ornament that needed to be placed on the highest shelf. So that is it, I asked, looking between the three of them. I get the rejection. She gets my life, and I'm supposed to clap. You are supposed to be family, Marla said icily. Now, we need to make a plan for you. I was talking to Mrs. Higgins today, and she said the community college in town has a decent associate program. It is affordable. You can live here. Keep your room. I don't want to go to community college, I said. I want to study logistics. You can do that later, Marla dismissed. And besides, with Delaney going away, we will be short on hands around here. It will be good to have you home to help out. You can keep your job at the hardware store, contribute to the household expenses. It is the practical choice. Karina. Practical. There was that word again. The shackle. Delaney was already texting on her phone, her thumbs flying across the screen. Oh my God. I have to tell Jessica. I have to post this. Mom, can we go shopping for dorm stuff this weekend I need? Like, everything? Of course, baby, Marla cooed, stroking Delaney's arm. We will get you everything you need. I stood there for another moment, realizing with a terrifying clarity that I was entirely alone. The decision had been made. The narrative had been written. Delaney was the scholar. I was the servant. If I fought it, if I screamed, if I called the foundation myself, Marla would paint me as the hysterical, jealous sister who couldn't stand her twin's success. She would poison everyone in town against me. I looked at the fake letter in my hand. I crumbled it into a ball. I am going to my room, I said. Don't slam the door, Marla called after me, her attention already back on Delaney. I walked up the stairs, my feet heavy as lead. I went into my bedroom and closed the door. I didn't slam it. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even cry. The pain was too deep for tears. It was a cold, hard knot in the center of my chest. I sat down at my desk. Through the thin walls, I could hear Marla laughing downstairs. I could hear Delaney squealing with delight. I opened my desk drawer and took out a fresh notebook. It was a spiral-bound notebook with a black cover. I picked up a pen, My hand was steady now. I wrote the date at the top of the first page, May 14th. Then I wrote down exactly what had happened. Marla intercepted the mail, handed me a suspicious rejection letter on plain paper, no signature. Minutes later, claimed a phone call transferred the scholarship to Delaney. Dad agreed to it. Marla suggested community college and paying rent. I wrote down the time of the call. I wrote down the exact phrasing of the rejection letter before I smoothed out the crumbled ball and taped it to the page. I made a vow to the empty room. I would not let them see me break. I would not give Marla the satisfaction of seeing me cry over this. I would play the role they assigned me. I would be the practical one. I would work. I would stay quiet. But I would remember. I turned the page, leaving it blank for tomorrow's entry. This notebook was no longer a diary. It was evidence. And one day, when I had enough of it, I would make sure the world saw the difference between the practical sister and the one who simply stole. The morning after the scholarship rejection, I did not stay in bed. I did not weep into my pillow. I did not beg my mother for a second chance. Instead, I woke up at 5 a.m, dressed in my work uniform for the hardware store, and sat at my desk with the lamp turned low. I was not operating on sadness anymore. I was operating on a cold, vibrating frequency of suspicion. I pulled the rejection letter out of my notebook. In the harsh light of the morning, it looked even more fraudulent. I ran my thumb over the paper. It was standard 20-pound bond paper, the kind you buy in reams of 500 at the grocery store. It had no watermark. The logo of the Hawthorne Foundation at the top was slightly pixelated, as if it had been copied and pasted from a website and then stretched too wide. I went to my closet and dug out a brochure I had received from the foundation months ago during the initial application phase. I placed the brochure next to the rejection letter. The difference was subtle, but to someone who paid attention to details, it was screaming. The font on the brochure was Garamond, elegant and serifed. The font on the rejection letter was Arial, the default setting on our home computer. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. This was not just a lie. This was a production. I left the house before Marla or Delaney woke up. I told myself I was going to work early, but I drove straight to the Briar Hollow Public Library. I needed a computer that Marla could not monitor. I needed a connection that did not run through the router in our living room. I sat down at a terminal in the back corner. The hum of the hard drive the only sound in the empty room. I logged into my email account. There was nothing there. No rejection, no acceptance, just spam and a few newsletters. I opened a new window and found the contact page for the Hawthorne Merit Scholarship. I stared at the blinking cursor for a long time. If I sent this email, I was crossing a line. I was accusing my own mother of something heinous. But then I remembered her face at dinner, the way she had looked at me with that pitying, triumphant smile. I typed the message. I kept it brief. I kept it emotionless. Subject application status, inquiry. Karina Westbrook, to whom it may concern. I am writing to formally request a status update on my scholarship application. I received a physical letter yesterday regarding a decision, but I would appreciate a digital confirmation for my records, as the correspondence I received was unclear. Thank you. Karina Westbrook. I hit send. Then I went to work. For 8 hours, I stacked lumber and mixed paint. I smiled at customers. I carried bags of concrete. My body was moving on autopilot, but my mind was stuck in that library terminal. Every time my phone buzzed in my pocket, I jumped. At 4 p.m, I went back to the library. I logged in. There was a reply. It arrived at 10:30 in the morning. Dear Ms. Westbrook, we are confused by your inquiry. Our records indicate that you received your acceptance packet 3 weeks ago. Furthermore, we received your signed confirmation and enrollment deposit waiver on May 2nd. You are currently listed as a confirmed incoming freshman for the fall semester at Redwood Crest University. If there is an issue with your paperwork, please contact us immediately. Sincerely, Sarah Jenkins, Admissions Coordinator. I stopped breathing. The library blurred around the edges. Acceptance. I had been accepted 3 weeks ago, and I had confirmed. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely control the mouse. I hit reply. My fingers hammered the keys. Ms. Jenkins, I did not sign any confirmation. I have not seen an acceptance letter. Please, can you send me a copy of the document you have on file? It is urgent. I sat there and waited. I refreshed the page every 30 seconds. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The librarian gave me a sharp look, but I didn't care. I felt like I was bleeding out in that chair. Finally, a new email appeared. It had a PDF attachment. I opened it. The document on the screen was a standard acceptance agreement. At the bottom, on the signature line, was my name, Karina Westbrook. I stared at the signature. It looked like mine. The loop of the C was big, just like I wrote it. The W had sharp points, but the slant was wrong. I wrote with a slight backward tilt, a habit from being left-handed. This signature slanted forward. It was a tracing. Someone had taken a piece of my homework, or a permission slip, put it over this document, and traced my name. My eyes moved to the contact information section below the signature. Primary contact phone. It was Marla's cell phone number. Primary contact email. The address listed was not mine. It was westbrookscholarsgmail.com. I recognized that email address. Marla had created it 2 years ago when Delaney started entering beauty pageants. She said it was to keep the junk mail organized. I scrolled down. There was a second page. It was a transfer request form. I, Karina Westbrook, hereby decline the monetary award associated with the Hawthorne Merit Scholarship due to a change in financial circumstances. I request that the committee review the alternate candidate from the same household, Delaney Westbrook, as per the family hardship clause outlined in Section 4B. I felt sick, physically, violently sick. There was no Section 4B. I knew the bylaws of the scholarship backward and forward. This was nonsense. This was a fabricated loophole that Marla had invented, banking on the fact that the committee wouldn't check the fine print of their own obscure rules. Or perhaps she had charmed someone on the inside. But the signature on the decline form was the smoking gun. It wasn't even a good forgery. It was rushed. The ink was heavy. Marla had not just stolen a letter. She had committed fraud. She had impersonated me. She had accepted my future, and then she had signed it away to her favorite daughter like it was a used car title. I printed everything: the email chain, the forged acceptance, the transfer request. The paper felt hot in my hands coming out of the printer. I needed one more verification. I needed to know if this was standard procedure or if my mother was a criminal genius. I drove to my high school. The parking lot was mostly empty, but Mr. Callum Ward's car was still there. He was the guidance counselor, a frantic man with coffee stains on his tie who had helped me with my initial application. I walked into his office without knocking. He looked up, startled, surrounded by piles of student files. "Karina," he said, adjusting his glasses, "I thought you would be celebrating. I heard the news about Delaney. A full ride? That is fantastic." "Mr. Ward," I said, my voice steady and cold, "how does a scholarship transfer work?" He blinked. "Excuse me. If a student wins a specific merit scholarship, can they just give it to their sibling? Is that a thing?" Mr. Ward frowned. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Well, generally speaking, no. Merit scholarships are attached to the individual, not the family. They are based on grades, interviews, and specific criteria. So if Delaney got it," I said, stepping closer to his desk, "it means she won it on her own." "Well, that is the assumption," he said, looking uncomfortable. "Although, I must admit, I was surprised. Your file was significantly stronger, but these committees move in mysterious ways. Maybe they saw a financial need, or maybe they liked her extracurriculars." "Mr. Ward," I asked, "if I had won, and I wanted to decline it, would I have to sign something?" "Absolutely," he said. "You would have to formally release the funds, legal documents." "Why are you asking this, Karina?" He looked at me with concern. He saw a girl who looked pale, whose eyes were rimmed with red, who was asking dangerous questions. "I am just trying to understand the process," I lied. "I want to make sure Delaney did everything right. That is very responsible of you, he said, relaxing. But do not worry. If the foundation announces it, the paperwork is done. Your mother is very thorough. She called me 3 times last week to check on the fax numbers for the foundation. I froze. She asked for fax numbers. Yes, Mr. Ward said. She said she needed to send in some supplementary medical forms for you. Something about your asthma. I did not have asthma. Right, I said. My asthma. Thank you, Mr. Ward. I walked out of the school. The puzzle pieces slammed together with the force of a car crash. Marla had used the school fax machine to send the forged documents. She had used my health as a cover to communicate with the foundation without raising flags. She had orchestrated this entire theft while I was at school, sitting in class, dreaming of a future she was actively deleting. I sat in my car in the empty parking lot. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The urge to drive home and scream was overwhelming. I wanted to throw the printed emails in her face. I wanted to tear Delaney's room apart. I wanted to shake my father until he woke up from his coma of passivity. But then I looked at the papers on the passenger seat. If I went home now, Marla would deny it. She would say I hacked her email. She would say I forged the papers to frame her. She was a master manipulator, and I was just an 18-year-old girl with no money and no power. She would turn Dad against me. She would turn the town against me. She would claim I was having a mental breakdown from jealousy. I could not win a shouting match. I could only win a trial. I needed more than this. I needed a timeline. I needed to know exactly when she logged in. I needed to record her admitting it. I needed to let her think she had won so she would get sloppy. I started the car. I drove to an office supply store 3 towns over, where no one knew my name. I bought a heavy-duty black binder and a box of plastic sheet protectors. I drove to a secluded park and sat on a bench. I organized the documents. Exhibit A. The fake rejection letter. Exhibit B. The email from Sarah Jenkins. Exhibit C. The forged signature comparison. Exhibit D. Mr. Ward's statement about the fax numbers. I labeled the binder simply the letter. I hid the binder under the spare tire in the trunk of the minivan. It was the only place Marla never looked. Then I drove home. When I walked into the kitchen, the scene was a domestic pastoral. Marla was making a pot roast. Delaney was flipping through a catalog of dorm room bedding. Gordon was reading the paper. "You are late," Marla said, not turning around. "Wash your hands. Dinner is in 10 minutes. I looked at her back. I looked at the woman who had birthed me and then erased me. "Sorry," I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "I was just picking up some extra shifts. I need to start saving for community college. Right?" Marla turned around. She looked at me, searching for a crack in my armor, searching for the rebellion she expected. "That is a very mature attitude, Karina," she said, smiling. "I am glad you are finally accepting reality." "I am," I said. I walked to the sink and turned on the water to wash the grime of the hardware store off my hands. I watched the water swirl down the drain. I was accepting reality. All right, I was accepting the reality that my mother was a criminal, and my sister was a beneficiary of theft. And I was accepting the reality that I was going to spend the next 10 years ensuring that when this house finally burned down, I would be the one holding the match. "So," Delaney said, pointing to a page in the catalog, "do you think teal or coral is better for my duvet? Mom says teal is more scholarly." I dried my hands on a towel. I looked at my sister, who was about to go to the college that belonged to me, living on the money that was signed in my name. "Go with teal," I said. "It hides stains better." I sat down at the table and waited for my father to say grace. I bowed my head, but I didn't pray. I planned. My life became a binary code of exhaustion and endurance, while Delaney was waking up in a dorm room paid for by a stolen future. I was waking up at 4:30 in the morning to the sound of a screeching alarm clock. I was living a double life, but unlike the one my mother had orchestrated, mine was built on sweat rather than lies. By day, I was a student at the local community college. sitting in fluorescent-lit classrooms with tired single mothers and laid-off factory workers. By night, I was a spectral figure in a high-vis vest, working the graveyard shift at a massive distribution warehouse on the edge of town. I had moved out of the house. I could not breathe the same air as Marla anymore. I found a studio apartment above a bakery that smelled permanently of burnt yeast and rented for $400 a month. It was the first time I had my own space, my own lock, and my own silence. I approached my life with the same cold, logistical precision I had used to investigate the scholarship fraud. I budgeted every penny. I calculated the exact amount of sleep I needed to function 5 hours and 20 minutes. I did not socialize. I did not date. I was a machine designed for one purpose: to become undeniable. It was in my second semester that I met Dr. Nolan Pierce. He taught a course called Introduction to Business Operations, a class most students took because they thought it would be an easy A. Dr. Pierce was different. He was a man in his late 40s with salt and pepper hair and eyes that seemed to scan the room like a barcode reader. He was not a career academic. He was a former supply chain executive who had cashed out early and started teaching because he was bored. I sat in the front row, not out of eagerness, but because it was the only way to force myself to stay awake after an 8-hour shift of lifting boxes. One Tuesday, he put a complex case study on the board. It was a routing problem for a fictional trucking company losing 20% of its revenue to fuel inefficiencies. "Who can tell me where they are bleeding money?" Dr. Pierce asked, leaning against his desk. The class was silent. Someone in the back guessed it was driver salaries. Another person suggested vehicle maintenance. I raised my hand. "It is the left turn," I said. "Dr." Pierce paused. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. "Explain." "The route map forces drivers to cross traffic at uncontrolled intersections," I said, my voice raspy from lack of sleep. "They are idling for an average of 4 minutes per turn. If you reroute them to prioritize right turns, even if it adds mileage, you reduce idle time and fuel consumption by 14%. Plus, you lower the accident liability." Dr. Pierce stared at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was a sharp, predatory smile. "What is your name?" "Karina Westbrook." "See me after class." "Karina." That afternoon, I stood by his desk while the other students filed out. Dr. Pierce was packing his bag. "You do not belong here," he said bluntly. I stiffened. "I paid my tuition." "I mean, you do not belong in a 101 class," he clarified. "You see the grid? Most people just see the trucks. What is your story? Why are you at a community college in the middle of nowhere instead of an Ivy League?" I hesitated. The old shame flared up. The feeling that I was damaged goods. I decided to give him half the truth. "My family situation is complicated," I said, gripping the strap of my backpack. "I had an opportunity, but it fell through. Financial aid issues." "A paperwork error?" he asked. "Something like that," I said. "I'm just trying to get my credits and transfer." Dr. Pierce nodded, but I could tell he saw through the vague answer. He didn't push. Instead, he pulled a flyer out of his briefcase. "I run a startup incubator on Thursday nights," he said. "It is not for grades. It is for people who want to build things. We have pizza, bad coffee, and a lot of arguments. You should come." "I work Thursday nights," I said. "Call in sick," he said, "or quit. If you are as smart as I think you are, that warehouse is wasting your time." "I need the money," I said. "Then build something that makes money," he countered. "Stop waiting for permission to shine. Karina, the world is not going to hand you a permit." I went to the meeting, and it changed everything. The Founders Club was a ragtag group of misfits gathering in the basement of the library. There were coders, designers, and dreamers. For the first time, I wasn't the weird girl who liked math. I was among my tribe. Dr. Pierce pushed us to solve real problems. "Don't invent a new toaster," he would say. "Find a pain point and kill it." I didn't have to look far for a pain point. My job at the warehouse was a nightmare of inefficiency. We were using paper manifests to track inventory that moved at the speed of light. Packages were lost, loaded onto the wrong trucks, or buried in the back of the facility because the sorting algorithm was 10 years out of date. I started coding. I wasn't a software engineer by trade, so I learned Python and SQL from YouTube videos at 3 in the morning. I built a crude, ugly piece of software that I called the Tracker. It was designed to optimize the pick path for warehouse workers, calculating the fastest route to grab items based on their location in the aisles. I tested it on my own shifts. I stopped following the manager's clipboard and started following my own algorithm. In 1 week, my pick rate went up by 40%. I was doing the work of 2 people in half the time. I showed it to Dr. Pierce 3 months later. He sat in front of my battered laptop, scrolling through the code. He was silent for a long time. "This is scalable," he said finally. "This isn't just a warehouse tool. This is a supply chain integration platform. Do you know how much companies pay for this kind of optimization?" "No," I said. "A lot," he said. "You need to pitch this." He drove me to a regional startup competition in Lakebridge, Tennessee. It was 3 hours away. We took his car because mine had a leaking radiator. The competition was held in a hotel conference room. It wasn't glamorous. The prize was only $1,000 and a mentorship package. But to me, it felt like the Olympics. I stood on stage in a suit I had bought from a thrift store. My palms were sweating. But when I started talking about nodes, edges, and latency and physical distribution, the fear vanished. I wasn't Karina the victim. I was Karina the architect. When they announced my name as the winner, I didn't cry. I felt a surge of cold, hard validation. I accepted the oversized check, $1,000. It was barely enough to cover 2 months of rent, but it was money I had made with my mind, not my back. It was the first brick of an empire. Dr. Pierce took me to a diner afterward to celebrate. We ate greasy burgers under yellow lights. "You have the bite," he told me. "Most people crumble when life hits them. You just get quieter and work harder. That is dangerous." "I have a lot of motivation," I said, dipping a fry in ketchup. "Is it anger?" he asked. "It is justice," I said. He leaned forward. "If you want to beat whoever bet against you, Karina, you do not do it by arguing. You do not do it by complaining. You make your results so big, so overwhelming, that they cannot bend reality anymore. You become the reality." That became my mantra. While I was building the foundation of what would eventually become Alderline Systems, I kept a digital eye on the life that was stolen from me. I created a burner account on Instagram to follow Delaney. It was a masochistic ritual. Every time I felt tired, every time I wanted to quit, I opened her profile. There she was, standing in front of the Redwood Crest Library, wearing a sweatshirt that cost more than my car. Caption, "So grateful for this journey." Scholarship life. There she was at a sorority formal, holding a red cup, laughing with her head thrown back. And Marla was worse. Her Facebook page was a shrine to her own ego. She posted screenshots of the dean's list, which Delaney had barely scraped onto with a 3.0 GPA, and wrote long, weeping captions about how we worked so hard for this. My daughter, the Hawthorne scholar. Proof that good things happen to good people. Every time I saw a post, I didn't just get angry. I screenshotted it. I saved the URL. I archived the timestamp. I added it to the digital version of the letter folder. They were digging a hole, shovel by shovel, post by post. They were creating a public record of their lie. They thought they were building a brand, but they were actually building a confession. I didn't comment. I didn't call. I let them think I had faded away into the background of a blue-collar life. I let Marla tell the neighbors that Karina is finding herself at community college. Bless her heart. I worked harder. I slept less. I took the $1,000 from Lakebridge and incorporated my company. I started cold calling local businesses, offering them my software for free just to get case studies. 2 years passed in a blur of caffeine and code. I transferred to a state university on my own dime, finishing my degree while running the company from my dorm room. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, As I was preparing a pitch deck for an angel investor, my phone pinged with an email notification. I glanced at it, expecting a client or a bill. The sender was Admin Hawthorne Foundation, org. My heart stopped. I clicked the notification. Subject urgent. File discrepancy. Regarding 2014 cycle. Dear Ms. Westbrook, we are conducting an internal audit of our scholarship disbursements from the past decade prior to a change in our board of directors. We have flagged a discrepancy regarding the Social Security number and signature on file for the Westbrook recipient. We need to schedule a brief call to clarify some information regarding the initial acceptance waiver. Please let us know your availability. I stared at the screen. The air in the room felt suddenly charged, like the atmosphere before a lightning strike. They had found a crack. Marla had covered her tracks, but she hadn't accounted for an internal audit years down the line. She hadn't accounted for the fact that lies, no matter how well constructed, eventually rot. I didn't reply immediately. I sat back in my chair and looked at the wall where I had taped the photocopied rejection letter years ago. It was starting. I wasn't ready to blow it up yet. I wasn't powerful enough yet. I needed to be untouchable before I engaged. But now I knew that the timer had started. I forwarded the email to Dr. Pierce with a note. It begins. Then I went back to work. I had a company to build. I had to become a billion-dollar CEO. Because when the truth finally came out, I needed to be standing on a pedestal so high that Marla could never reach me again. Leaving the humidity of the South for the coastal chill of Westmere Bay, California, felt like shedding a layer of dead skin. I packed my entire life into 2 suitcases and a laptop bag, boarding a one-way flight with a bank account that hovered dangerously close to zero. I did not tell my parents I was leaving. I simply stopped showing up to the Sunday dinners I had been guilted into attending. I let my phone go to voicemail. I became a ghost in their lives, so I could finally become a person in mine. Westmere Bay was a different planet. It was a place where people spoke in abbreviations ROI, KPI, SAS, and where hoodies were considered appropriate boardroom attire. I had been accepted into a brutal, high-octane accelerator program called Velocity. They gave me a desk, a stipend that barely covered the rent of a shoebox apartment, and 3 months to turn my warehouse tracking code into a viable business. This was the birth of Alderline Systems. I stopped being Karina the student. I stopped being Karina the twin. I became a creature of pure output. I coded for 18 hours a day, surviving on protein bars and sheer spite. My software, which I had refined from the crude tool I used at the warehouse, was designed to solve the last-mile visibility problem. Small to mid-sized logistics companies were losing millions in inventory because their tracking systems went dark once a package hit the local distribution nodes. Alderline turned the lights back on. The first month was a nightmare of rejection. I pitched to 20 investors, and 20 investors told me that logistics was unsexy, or that a 22-year-old woman didn't have the grit to manage supply chains. But I had something they didn't understand. I had the memory of a stolen letter. My breakthrough came in the form of a contract with a regional shipping magnate who was losing 12% of his medical supply shipments. I installed Alderline on his fleet for free. In 2 weeks, I recovered $400,000 worth of inventory. He signed a contract the next day. With revenue on the books, I went back to the venture capitalists. This time, I got a meeting with Elliot Rains. Elliot was a legend in Westmere Bay. He was an angel investor who had backed 3 unicorns before they even had logos. He was eccentric, sharp, and notoriously difficult to impress. I met him in his office, which was essentially a glass box overlooking the ocean. He didn't look at my slide deck. He didn't look at my financial projections. He just stared at me while I pitched, his eyes narrowing. When I finished, silence stretched between us. "You are angry," Elliot said. It wasn't a question. I blinked, taken aback. "I am passionate about efficiency, Mr. Rains." "No," he said, standing up and walking to the window. "I hear passion all day. Passion is bubbly. Passion is optimistic. You sound like you are trying to prove gravity exists to people who don't believe in falling. You have a chip on your shoulder the size of a shipping container." He turned back to me. "Who told you that you weren't good enough?" I gripped the edge of the table. I could have given him the polished answer. I could have talked about market gaps, but something about Elliot's gaze made me want to drop the mask. "My mother," I said, "and the education system. Did they take your money?" "No," I said, my voice steady. "They took my name and a letter." Elliot watched me for a long moment. Then, a slow grin spread across his face. It was the look of a man who had just found a weapon he wanted to buy. "Good," he said. "People who have had their future stolen make the best CEOs. They don't sleep. They don't settle, and they never, ever let anyone else hold the pen again." He pulled a checkbook out of his drawer. "I am in for $500,000, but I have one condition." "What is it?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. "You never let the chip go," Elliot said. "You use it. You write your future in your own ink, Karina, and you make sure it is indelible." With Elliot's backing, Alderline Systems exploded. We moved out of the accelerator and into a real office. I hired engineers, sales reps, and data scientists. I woke up every morning with a singular focus growth. I wanted Alderline to be so big, so omnipresent, that Marla and Delaney would have to see my name every time they opened a newspaper or clicked on a business article. By the time I was 26, we were processing 10 million transactions a day. By 27, we were profitable. By 28, the tech press had crowned me the queen of logistics. They loved my story, or at least the version I gave them. I was the self-made woman, the community college transfer who outcoded the Ivy Leaguers. I carefully curated the narrative. I never mentioned the twin. I never mentioned the fraud. I kept the past in a sealed box, only opening it when I needed fuel. But success acts like a beacon for parasites. The first text from Marla arrived 3 days after I was featured on the cover of a major business magazine. I hadn't spoken to her in 4 years. "Karina, honey, I just saw the article. I am crying tears of joy. I always told everyone you were the smart one. I always believed in you. Call me. We miss you so much." I stared at the phone in my glass-walled office. The revisionist history was breathtaking. "I always believed in you." This from the woman who told me I aimed too high, who handed me a fake rejection letter without blinking. I didn't reply. I blocked the number, but they found other ways. Delaney sent a LinkedIn request a week later. The message attached was a masterclass in entitlement. "Hey sis, long time no see. Congrats on the company. So crazy. Listen, I know it's been a few years since I graduated from Redwood Crest, finally LOL, but I've been looking for the right opportunity and I was thinking, since you are the boss now, maybe you could connect me with your marketing team. I would be a great brand ambassador. Let's keep it in the family XOXO." I read the message twice. Let's keep it in the family. The audacity was almost impressive. Delaney had spent 4 years partying on a scholarship that bore my name, likely struggling to finish a degree I would have crushed in 3 years. And now she wanted a job. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't ask how I was. She just assumed that my success was a communal resource, a tap she could turn on whenever she was thirsty. I did not block Delaney. Instead, I accepted the connection request. I wanted her to see my updates. I wanted her to see every award, every valuation hike, every moment of glory she couldn't touch. "Let her watch," I whispered to the empty room. As Alderline prepared for its next massive leap, a potential acquisition that would value us at nearly $2 billion, we had to undergo a rigorous due diligence process. Auditors were crawling through every financial decision I had ever made. One afternoon, my personal accountant, a meticulous woman named Sarah, asked for a meeting. She looked uncomfortable. "Karina," she said, sliding a report across my desk. "We are clearing up your personal tax history to make sure everything is spotless for the SEC. I found something odd in your educational records from back home." "What is it?" I asked, expecting a forgotten student loan payment. "It is about the Hawthorne Scholarship," she said. My blood ran cold. I didn't receive that scholarship. I know, Sarah said. But there was a secondary fund attached to it, a living stipend for low-income recipients. It looks like checks were issued in your name for 2 years, totaling about $24,000. They were deposited into an account at a local credit union in North Carolina. I frowned. I never opened an account there. The account was joint, Sarah said. It was in the name of Marla Westbrook, with you listed as a joint account holder. The signatures on the endorsement checks, well, they look like yours, but the dates align with when you were already living in California. I picked up the paper. There it was. Another layer of the crime. Marla hadn't just stolen the tuition for Delaney. She had been cashing checks meant for my living expenses, checks that were likely issued because the fraudulent application claimed I was destitute. She had been forging my signature for years after I left. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was wire fraud. This was identity theft on a federal level. Thank you, Sarah, I said, my voice calm. Leave this with me. I will handle it. If this comes up in the audit. It won't, I promised. I will make sure the account is closed and the liability is addressed. I sat alone in my office as the sun set over the Pacific Ocean, turning the water a bruised purple. I looked at the evidence of the $24,000 stolen from a daughter who was working graveyard shifts to buy ramen noodles. It was the final straw. I had been content to simply outgrow them, to leave them in the dust of my success. But they weren't just in the dust. They were still stealing from my pockets. The intercom on my desk buzzed. It was Elena, my assistant. Karina, I know it is late, but we just got an email from the Education for Tomorrow Gala in Virginia. They are very persistent. They know about the valuation rumors. They want to know if you would consider being the headline sponsor. I froze. The Education for Tomorrow Gala. It was the same organization that managed the alumni network for the Hawthorne Foundation. It was the gala where Marla and Delaney would undoubtedly be preening, playing the role of the successful scholarship family. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with a satisfying, metallic snap. The valuation, the fraud, the gala. They wanted a sponsor. They wanted a check. I looked at the report of the stolen money. Then I looked at the projection of my $1.9 billion deal. Elena, I said into the intercom, tell them yes. Really? Elena asked, surprised. Yes, I said. Tell them I will sponsor the whole thing. Tell them I want a keynote slot. And tell them I am bringing a presentation. I leaned back in my chair. The time for grinding was over. The time for building in the dark was over. I was going to Virginia. I was going to buy the stage my mother was standing on, and then I was going to pull the trapdoor. The boardroom in my San Francisco headquarters was soundproof, a glass aquarium suspended in the sky where sound went to die. But inside my head, the noise was deafening. I was sitting across from Dana Rourke, the most expensive and lethal corporate attorney in the Bay Area. She was not a woman who offered tea and sympathy. She offered risk assessments and damage control. On the table between us lay a new stack of documents. Distinct from the acquisition papers I had signed days ago, these were darker. These were the autopsy reports of my childhood. We have a problem, Karina, Dana said. She did not blink. Her voice was as crisp as the tailored navy suit she wore. And when I say we, I mean the company. I mean the valuation. I mean the $1.9 billion you are about to secure. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my face impassive. I thought the audit was clean. My finances are perfect. Your finances are perfect, Dana agreed. Your personal history is a minefield. You asked me to dig into the Hawthorne scholarship discrepancy. I dug. And what I found is not just a family dispute. It is a felony. Several felonies, actually. She slid a black binder across the polished mahogany table. If we go public with this lawsuit against your mother after the acquisition deal closes, the press is going to eat you alive, Dana warned. They will not see Karina the victim. They will see Karina the CEO involved in a messy fraud scandal. Shareholders hate drama. If the narrative spins the wrong way, if it looks like you were complicit or even just negligent, The stock price will tank before the opening bell rings. We are talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in lost value. I felt a cold spike of adrenaline. So what are you suggesting I let her get away with it? I am suggesting we manage the explosion, Dana said. We control the blast radius. You cannot just file a police report and hope for the best. You need undeniable, bulletproof proof that you were the target, not the participant, and you need to close this loop before the acquisition is finalized next month. I have the rejection letter, I said. I have a forged signature. Circumstantial, Dana countered. A defense attorney could argue you gave her permission verbally. They could argue you forgot. We need something that proves intent. We need the mechanism of the fraud. She opened the binder to a tab marked with a red sticky note. I subpoenaed the digital records from the Hawthorne Foundation, Dana said. I threatened them with a gross negligence suit if they did not comply. They handed over everything: server logs, IP addresses, email correspondence archives. Karina, look at this. I looked at the page she was pointing to. It was a log of email exchanges from 11 years ago. The Foundation communicates primarily via email for the acceptance phase, Dana explained. They sent the initial acceptance to the email address on your application, but 3 days later, they received a request to update the contact information. I scanned the log. The request came from an email address, Karina Westbrook, studentgmail.com. I never created that account, I said softly. I know, Dana said, because I traced the IP address used to create it. It resolves to a residential internet provider in Briar Hollow, North Carolina. Specifically, the account was registered to Gordon and Marla Westbrook. My stomach turned. Marla hadn't just intercepted the mail. She had gone online, sat at the family computer probably while I was in the next room doing homework, and created a digital mask. She had become me. Read the email sent from that account, Dana instructed. I read the text. It was dated May 17th, 3 days after the physical letter arrived. Dear Committee, please update my contact email to this address as I'm having trouble with my school account. Also, please direct all future financial correspondence to my mother, Marla Westbrook, as she manages my administrative affairs. I would like to initiate the sibling transfer process we discussed. Sincerely, Karina. She impersonated me, I whispered. The horror of it was intimate and violating. It wasn't just theft. It was identity erasure. She pretended to be me to give my life away. It gets worse, Dana said, flipping the page. The transfer form. We knew the signature was forged, but look at the notary stamp. I looked. The document required a notary public to witness the signature for the transfer of funds. There was a stamp at the bottom, Harold Jenkins, notary public. I looked him up, Dana said. Harold Jenkins is Marla's cousin. He lost his license 4 years ago for falsifying real estate documents. She didn't just trick the system. She used a compromised agent to bypass the legal checks. I closed my eyes. The scale of the betrayal was architectural. It was designed. It was built. So we have her, I said. This is proof. It is strong evidence, Dana corrected. But if you take this to court, Marla will claim you were sitting right next to her when she sent that email. She will claim you asked her to type it because you were busy. She will claim Harold Jenkins is a family friend who did you a favor. It becomes he said, she said, and in the court of public opinion, a mother crying on the stand about her ungrateful billionaire daughter is a powerful image. I looked up at Dana. I am not going to let her win. I am not going to let her keep the money or the reputation. Then do not sue her yet, Dana said. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. Trap her. If you want a clean kill, you need a confession. You need her to admit, in her own words, that she did this without your knowledge, and you need to do it in a way that is admissible in court. How? I asked. Marla is a pathological liar. She believes her own stories. She will never admit it. She will if she thinks she is safe, Dana said. She will if she thinks she is bragging, or if she is cornered. Dana pulled out a map. She circled a location in red marker. Stonegate City, Virginia, Dana said. That is where the gala is, correct? Yes. Virginia is a one-party consent state for recording conversations, Dana said. That means as long as one person in the conversation knows it is being recorded, that person being you, it is entirely legal to record it and use it as evidence. You do not need her permission, you just need her voice. I looked at the map, the gala, the stage. The organizers want me to be the headline sponsor, I said, the plan forming in my mind like a crystalline structure. They want the Westbrook family front and center. Use that, Dana said. Give them what they want. Make Marla feel like the queen of the ball. Lower her defenses. Make her feel so secure, so validated, that she slips. And when she does, you make sure the tape is rolling. I stood up and walked to the window. The city below was covered in fog, but my vision was perfectly clear. I need full control of the event, I said. I am going to agree to the sponsorship, $100,000. No. Make it $200,000, but I have conditions. Dana clicked her pen, ready to write. Name them. Condition 1, I said, turning back to face her. The Westbrook family is to be the guests of honor, not just attendees. I want them on stage. I want a special segment dedicated to the Westbrook Scholarship legacy. Dana raised an eyebrow. You are going to honor the lie. I am going to inflate the balloon until it pops, I said. Condition 2, I want a private pre-gala reception, just the family and the foundation board, in a secure room, no press, just intimate family time, to verify the documents for the press release. A pressure cooker, Dana noted. Smart. And condition 3, I continued, I want access to the AV system. I want to control the presentation slides for the keynote speech. Personally, Dana smiled. It was a shark smile. I can draft the contract today. We will frame the request for the private meeting as a compliance formality so they don't get suspicious. We will say we just need to verify the timeline for the biography segment. Do it, I said. I sat back down and opened the binder again. I stared at the fake email address. Karina Westbrook, student, for 11 years. That email account had been a ghost. A digital phantom that Marla used to steer my destiny. She had used it to decline my dreams. She had used it to steal my money. I picked up my phone. I had the contact information for the gala organizer. A woman named Meredith, saved in my notes. I dialed the number. Meredith, I said when she answered, putting on my best CEO voice, warm, authoritative, and utterly fake. It is Karina Westbrook. I have been thinking about your proposal. Oh, Ms. Westbrook, Meredith gasped. We were hoping you would call. Have you reached a decision? I have, I said. Alderline Systems would be delighted to sponsor the Education for Tomorrow Gala. In fact, we want to double the platinum tier donation. I heard Meredith choke back a sound of pure joy. That is incredibly generous. We would be honored. There is just one thing, I added, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I want to make this night special for my mother and sister. They sacrificed so much for me. I want them to be the stars of the evening. Can we arrange a special award ceremony? Maybe bring them up on stage right before my speech. Absolutely, Meredith said. We can script it however you like. Your mother must be so proud. She is, I said. She has no idea how memorable this night is going to be. I hung up the phone. I looked at Dana. It is done. Dana closed her legal pad. I will have the private investigators sweep the venue in Stonegate the day before. We will plant microphones in the private reception room. High fidelity. We will have a backup recording on your person. When you walk into that room with Marla, you will be a walking wire. And the documents, I asked. I will have the certified copies from the bank and the foundation ready, Dana said. When you confront her, you won't be asking questions. You will be showing her the answers. I nodded. I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. It was the calm of the executioner who has sharpened the blade and is simply waiting for dawn. I looked at the invitation that Meredith had sent over earlier in the week. It was thick, heavy cardstock with gold foil lettering, The Hawthorne Foundation invites you to a night of excellence. I ran my finger over the gold letters. Marla had spent her whole life chasing this kind of validation. She wanted the gold foil. She wanted the applause. She wanted the world to look at her and see a success story. She had traded her daughter to get it. Now, I was going to give her exactly what she wanted. I was going to give her the biggest audience of her life, and then I was going to turn on the lights. "You want a stage, Mom?" I said to the empty air, my voice cold enough to freeze the water in the glass on the table. "I will give you a stage." The courier service I used for the invitations was the same one Alderline Systems used for high-security contracts. I did not trust the postal service with this. I wanted a signature upon receipt. I wanted a timestamp. I sent 2 packages to Briar Hollow. One was addressed to Marla Westbrook. The other was addressed to Delaney Westbrook. Inside each was a heavy, cream-colored envelope embossed with gold leaf, inviting them to the diamond-tier VIP reception at the Education for Tomorrow Gala. The letter inside promised a private photographer, a feature in the Foundation's annual magazine, and an exclusive networking session with industry leaders. It was the perfect bait for a woman like Marla. She did not crave money as much as she craved status. She wanted to be the matriarch in the velvet rope section. Her reply came 17 minutes after the courier confirmed delivery. "My darling Karina." The text read, "I am weeping. I knew you would come around. I knew you wanted to share this success with your family. We are so proud of you. We have already booked our flights. See you in Virginia." I stared at the screen in my office. "I knew you would come around." It was a phrase loaded with 11 years of gaslighting. To Marla. My silence wasn't a boundary. It was a tantrum, and my invitation wasn't a truce. It was a capitulation. She thought she had won. She thought the prodigal daughter had returned to kiss the ring. "I will see you there," I typed back. "We need to talk before the ceremony." "Of course," she replied. "Anything for my girl." I put the phone down. My hands were perfectly steady. I wasn't Karina the daughter anymore. I was Karina the CEO, and I was closing a merger. 3 days later, I stood in a private conference room at the Grand Dominion Hotel in Stonegate City. The gala was taking place in the ballroom downstairs, a cavernous space currently being filled with orchids and crystal glasses. But up here, the air was sterile and cold. Dana Rourke was checking the placement of a vase of flowers on the mahogany table. Hidden behind the petals was a high-fidelity microphone. "The feed is clear," Dana said, tapping her earpiece. "I have the recorder running on 3 redundant drives." Seated at the far end of the table were our witnesses. I had flown in Mr. Henderson, a senior compliance officer from the Hawthorne Foundation, who looked terrified to be caught in the middle of this. Next to him was Ms. Klein, a registrar from Redwood Crest University, and in the corner sat a man named Arthur Prynne, a notary public I had hired specifically because he had no connection to anyone in North Carolina. "Remember," Dana said, walking over to me, "you do not need to get angry. You just need to get her talking. The moment she admits to any knowledge of the interference, we have her. The law in Virginia protects us. She speaks, we record, we win." "I am ready," I said. The door opened. It wasn't Marla. It was Delaney. My sister looked expensive. She was wearing a dress that I recognized from a recent runway show, something that likely cost $5,000 money she definitely did not earn working as a junior brand consultant for a firm that had no website. Her hair was blown out in soft waves, and her smile was dazzling. "Karina," she squealed, rushing toward me with her arms open. I did not step forward to hug her. I stood my ground, my posture rigid. Delaney faltered, her arms dropping awkwardly to her sides. "Wow," she said, laughing nervously. "Okay, corporate mode, I get it. You look intense." "You look well, Delaney," I said. "I am amazing," she said, regaining her confidence. "This gala is going to be insane. Mom is in the bathroom fixing her lipstick. She is so excited. Listen, before she gets here, I wanted to ask you something." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. I know you are super busy, but I sent you that LinkedIn message about a job I really think I could help Alderline. I have a lot of connections from Redwood Crest. I could be, like, your face in the philanthropic world. I looked at her. She truly believed it. She believed that the 4 years she spent at a university she didn't qualify for, paid for by a scholarship she didn't earn, had prepared her to represent my company. "Delaney," I said quietly, "do you still have the letter?" She blinked. "What us?" "The acceptance letter," I said. "The one from Hawthorne, the one you got 11 years ago. Do you still have the physical copy?" Delaney's smile faltered. Her eyes darted to the left, then back to me. It was a micro-expression of panic. I don't know," she said. "Mom keeps all that stuff. You know how she is with paperwork. Why?" "Because I am curious," I said, stepping into her personal space. "Did you ever actually read it? Did you ever see your name on the acceptance line? Or did you just pack your bags because Mom told you to?" Delaney took a step back. Her face hardened. "Why are you doing this? We are here to celebrate. Why do you always have to dig up the past?" "Because the past is expensive, Delaney," I said, "and someone has to pay the bill." "You are being weird," she snapped. "I worked hard for that degree. You can't take that away from me." "I don't have to," I said. Before she could respond, the heavy double doors swung open again. Marla Westbrook made her entrance. She was wearing a silver gown that shimmered under the fluorescent lights. She looked regal. She looked triumphant. When she saw me, her face broke into a performance of maternal adoration that was so convincing it almost made me sick. "There she is," Marla cried, rushing over to grab my shoulders. "My big-time CEO. Oh, look at you. You look so professional." She tried to pull me into a hug, but I stiffened. I gently removed her hands from my arms. "Hello, Mother," I said. Marla didn't let the rejection faze her. She turned to look at the room. She saw Dana. She saw Mr. Henderson and the others. Her smile tightened just a fraction. "Oh," she said. "I thought this was a family reception. Who are these people?" "This is my legal counsel, Dana Rourke," I said, gesturing to Dana. "And representatives from the Hawthorne Foundation and the university. Please, sit down." Marla laughed, a tinkling, nervous sound. "Legal counsel Karina, don't be so dramatic. We are here to drink champagne and take pictures." "We will get to the pictures," I said. "But first, there is a compliance issue we need to resolve. Since Alderline is donating a significant sum tonight, $200,000, my auditors require a clean chain of title on the family's history with the foundation." I pulled a chair out for her at the head of the table. "Sit," Marla hesitated. She looked at Delaney, who was standing by the wall, looking pale. Then she looked at the gold invitations sticking out of her purse. Her greed won out. She sat down. "Well," she said, adjusting her shawl, "if it is just paperwork, you know I am excellent with paperwork." "I know," I said. I sat opposite her. Dana slid a single sheet of paper across the table. "This is an affidavit of non-interference," I explained. "It simply states that you, Marla Westbrook, never interfered with, altered, or intercepted any correspondence regarding the college applications of your daughters in the year 2014. It confirms that the scholarship awarded to Delaney was processed through standard channels without your direct manipulation." Marla stared at the paper. She didn't pick up the pen. "This is ridiculous," she scoffed. "Why would I need to sign this? Because there are rumors," I lied smoothly. "Competitors of my company are trying to dig up dirt. They are suggesting that the Westbrook family has a history of fraud. I need you to sign this so I can shut them down. Unless, of course, the rumors are true." Marla's face turned a shade of pink. "How dare you? I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you girls, and you bring me into a room with strangers to interrogate me." "It is not an interrogation," I said. "It is a signature. If you did nothing wrong, it is just ink on paper." Marla stood up. "I am not signing anything. This is insulting. Come on, Delaney. We are leaving. We will go down to the ballroom and wait for the press." You can't go to the ballroom, Marla, I said. My voice didn't rise, but it carried a weight that stopped her in her tracks. Because if you walk out that door without signing, I pull the sponsorship, I canceled the check, and I tell the organizers exactly why. Marla spun around. Her eyes were blazing. You wouldn't dare. You selfish, ungrateful little... She caught herself, glancing at the witnesses. She took a breath and switched tactics. She slumped her shoulders, playing the victim. Karina, she said, her voice wobbling. Why are you doing this? I know you are jealous. I know you always felt like Delaney got more attention. But that was 11 years ago. Can't you just let it go? Can't you just let your sister have her moment? You have billions of dollars. Why do you need to ruin this for us? I am not ruining anything, I said. I am clarifying. I picked up a remote control from the table. You say you didn't interfere. You say Delaney won it fair and square. She did, Marla shouted. She wrote that essay. She had the community spirit. I pressed the button. The projector screen behind me hummed to life. The first image appeared. It was the email log from Karina Westbrook, student Gmail. Com. Marla froze. This is an email sent on May 17th, 2014, I said, reading from the screen. It requests a transfer of funds. It was sent from an IP address registered to the Westbrook household. I was at school when this was sent. Delaney was at cheer practice. You were the only one home, Marla. I don't know what that is, Marla stammered. Hacker, it must be hackers. I clicked the remote. The next image appeared, a side-by-side comparison of signatures. My real signature from a driver's license application, and the signature on the scholarship decline form. And this, I said, this is a forgery. But not just any forgery. It is traced. You can see the indentation marks on the original document, which Mr. Henderson here was kind enough to bring from the archives. Mr. Henderson nodded gravely. Marla was breathing heavily now. Her chest heaved up and down. She looked at Delaney, but Delaney was staring at the floor, refusing to make eye contact. You are trying to frame me, Marla hissed. You constructed this. You have been planning this. I didn't construct the bank records, Marla, I said. Click. The screen changed to a bank statement from the local credit union. $24,000, I said. Stolen from the living stipend fund. Checks cashed in my name while I was living in California eating ramen noodles. You signed them. You spent them. Marla slammed her hands on the table. The sound echoed in the quiet room. It was for the family, she screamed. I used that money to pay off the house. The house you grew up in. I used it to buy groceries. I did what I had to do. You stole it, I said. You stole my identity. You stole my education. I saved you, Marla yelled, her composure shattering completely. You were going to go to that fancy school and leave us. You were going to forget about us. Delaney needed it more. She needed the help. You were always going to be fine. You are a survivor. Karina, look at you. You are rich. You are fine. So you decided, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. You decided to play God. You decided which daughter deserved a future. I decided to be a mother, Marla retorted, tears streaming down her face, tears of rage, not sorrow. I had to balance the scales. Delaney isn't like you. She is soft. She needed the push. If I hadn't switched those letters, she would have ended up working at a diner in Briar Hollow for the rest of her life. The room went dead silent. The hum of the projector fan seemed to roar. Marla stood there, panting. She looked around the room, expecting to see agreement, expecting someone to understand the twisted logic of her favoritism. But Mr. Henderson looked horrified. Ms. Klein had her hand over her mouth. Dana was looking down at her notepad, scribbling furiously, and I just looked at her. What did you just say? I asked. Marla blinked. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a creeping realization of what she had done. I said, she faltered. I said I helped her. No, I corrected. You said, If I hadn't switched those letters, you admitted it. Marla's face went white. She looked at the microphone hidden in the flowers. She looked at the witnesses. You tricked me, she whispered. I gave you a choice, I said. I gave you a piece of paper to sign. You chose to scream instead. This is entrapment, she said, backing away from the table. I didn't mean it. I was emotional. You can't use this. I can, Dana Rourke said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was calm and professional. Under Virginia Code Section 19.262, this conversation is being legally recorded with the consent of one party. We have your confession on tape, Mrs. Westbrook, along with the admission of financial fraud regarding the stipend. Marla looked at Delaney. Delaney, tell them I did it for you. Delaney looked up. Her mascara was running. She looked at her mother. Then she looked at me. She saw the power in the room. She saw the inevitable outcome. I didn't know, Delaney whispered. Marla's eyes widened. What? I didn't know, Delaney said louder, her voice shaking. Mom told me she got the scholarship. I didn't know she stole it. It was a lie. I knew it was a lie. Delaney knew it was a lie, but it was the smartest move Delaney had ever made. She was cutting the anchor before the ship went down. You little traitor, Marla breathed. After everything I did for you. I think we are done here, I said. I stood up and buttoned my blazer. Mr. Henderson, Ms. Klein, thank you for your time. I believe you have enough to update your files. Karina, Marla said, her voice shifting into a desperate plea. She reached across the table, trying to grab my hand. Karina, please, don't do this. Not tonight. Not in front of the press. We can fix this. I will pay you back. I will sign a promissory note. Just don't humiliate me. I looked down at her hand, the hand that had held the pen, the hand that had rewritten my life. I am not going to humiliate you, Mother, I said. I am just going to let you finish what you started. What do you mean? She asked, trembling. You wanted to be on stage, I said. You wanted to talk about the Westbrook legacy. Well, the gala starts in 20 minutes, and I think the audience is ready to hear the truth. I turned to Dana. Is everything ready for the presentation? Uploaded and queued, Dana said. Good, I said. Let's go downstairs. I walked out of the conference room without looking back. Behind me, I heard Marla sobbing, a jagged, ugly sound that echoed off the cold walls. But for the first time in my life, the sound didn't make me feel small. It sounded like justice. The ballroom of the Grand Dominion Hotel was a masterpiece of illusion. Thousands of white orchids cascaded from the ceiling, and the air smelled of expensive perfume and old money. 500 of Virginia's elite educators, philanthropists, and politicians sat at round tables draped in silk, unaware that they were attending a public execution masked as a charity gala. I sat in the front row, center stage. My dress was black, sharp, and architectural, a visual contrast to the frothy pastels worn by the other women. To my right sat Dana Rourke, checking her watch with the precision of a bomb technician. To my left was an empty chair reserved for the ghost of the girl I used to be. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the room. The master of ceremonies, a local news anchor with a voice like melted butter, stepped up to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, beaming. Tonight is about legacy. It is about the sacrifices we make for the next generation, and no family embodies that spirit more than our guests of honor. Please welcome to the stage the matriarch of the Westbrook family, Marla Westbrook, and the Hawthorne scholar herself, Delaney Westbrook. The applause was polite but enthusiastic. The orchestra swelled. Marla walked out from the wings. She had touched up her makeup since our confrontation in the private room upstairs. She was smiling, waving to the crowd with a terrifyingly practiced grace. She was betting everything on the idea that I wouldn't dare make a scene in front of 500 people. She was betting on my shame. She didn't realize I had burned my shame years ago to keep myself warm in a garage. Delaney followed her, but the bounce was gone from her step. She looked pale, her eyes darting toward me in the front row like a trapped animal. They took their places at the podium. Marla leaned into the microphone. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling with that fabricated emotion I knew so well. "Oh, thank you. Raising 2 daughters as a mother, it isn't easy, but when you see them succeed, when you see them grasp the opportunities you fought for, it makes every struggle worth it." She dabbed a dry eye. The audience murmured sympathetically. "And now," the MC said, regaining control of the mic, "we have a special surprise. The headline sponsor of this evening, the CEO of Alderline Systems, and the other half of this incredible twin duo, has a few words. Please welcome Karina Westbrook." The spotlight swung to me. I stood up. I didn't smile. I walked up the stairs to the stage, the click of my heels echoing on the wood. I walked past Marla. She hissed a whisper at me, low enough that the microphone didn't catch it. "Don't you dare!" I took the podium. I adjusted the microphone stand. I looked out at the sea of faces wealthy, comfortable people who believed in meritocracy because it validated their own success. "Thank you," I said. My voice was steady, magnified by the speakers to fill every corner of the room. "We are here to celebrate the power of a scholarship. We are here to talk about how a single piece of paper can change a life." I paused. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. "I want to tell you a story about a letter," I continued. 11 years ago, a letter was mailed to my house in Briar Hollow. It was a thick envelope, the kind that holds a future. Marla shifted beside me. She reached for my arm, trying to play it off as an affectionate touch, but her grip was hard. "Karina, honey, let's not bore them with old stories." I pulled away. I pulled a small remote control from my pocket. "But I never read that letter," I said to the audience, "because it was intercepted, and in its place, I was handed this." I clicked the button, the massive projection screen behind us, which had been displaying the gala logo, suddenly changed. A 20-foot-tall image of the fake rejection letter appeared, the cheap paper, the pixelated logo, the generic "regret to inform you" text. A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. "This is the forgery my mother handed me," I said, my voice cold and clinical. "She told me I wasn't good enough. She told me the world was unfair, and I believed her." "She is confused," Marla shouted, stepping forward, her smile cracking into a rictus of panic. She waved her hands at the technical booth. "Turn it off. My daughter is having a mental health episode. She has been under so much stress." "I am perfectly lucid, Mother," I said. Click, the screen changed again. This time, it showed the email log, the timestamp, the creation of the fake account. "Karina Westbrook, student." "This is the digital footprint of the fraud," I narrated, ignoring Marla's increasing volume. "May 17th, 2014, an account created from the Westbrook home IP address, used to impersonate me and decline the scholarship I never knew I had won." The murmurs in the crowd turned into gasps. People were pointing. Phones were coming out to record. "Stop it!" Marla shrieked. She lunged for the remote, but I stepped back. "You are lying. You are just jealous because Delaney was the special one. You are trying to humiliate us." "And finally," I said, pressing the button a third time, the screen is filled with a spreadsheet. It was the bank transfer record. The $24,000 in stipend checks, cashed over 2 years, with signatures that clearly did not match the ones on my legal documents. "This is the theft," I said. "Money meant for a student's living expenses, money that went into my mother's renovation fund while I was working graveyard shifts in a warehouse." Marla grabbed the microphone stand, wrestling it toward her. The feedback screeched, a high-pitched wail that made everyone cover their ears. "It is a lie," Marla screamed into the mic, her voice distorted and ugly. "She forged these. She is a tech CEO. She can fake anything. Why would I do that to my own child? I love them both equally. Delaney won that scholarship. Tell them, Delaney." She grabbed Delaney by the arm and shoved her toward the podium. "Tell them." Delaney looked at the crowd. 500 pairs of eyes were boring her. She looked at the screen. where her life's foundation was being dismantled pixel by pixel. She looked at Marla, whose face was twisted into a mask of desperate rage. Then she looked at me. I wasn't angry. I was just waiting. Delaney started. Her voice cracked. "Tell them it is a lie," Marla commanded, digging her nails into Delaney's arm. Delaney flinched. She pulled her arm away, and at that moment, something in my sister finally broke. The years of being the golden child, the puppet, the one who had to carry the burden of Marla's dreams, it all collapsed. "I saw it," Delaney whispered. The room went silent. Even Marla froze. "What did you say?" Marla hissed. Delaney stepped closer to the mic. She was crying now. Ugly, heaving sobs. "I saw the letter, the real one. It was in your nightstand drawer. It was addressed to Karina. I asked you about it a week after the acceptance came." "Delaney, shut up," Marla warned, her voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "I asked you," Delaney yelled, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "And you told me it was junk mail. You told me it was a mistake from the mailing list. You told me to forget. I saw it because it would just hurt Karina's feelings." A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. This was the twist that turned the knife. Delaney wasn't just a beneficiary. She was a witness who had been gaslit into compliance. "You knew," I asked Delaney softly. "I suspected." Delaney sobbed, turning to me. "But I was 18. I was stupid. And then I was at the school, and everyone was proud of me, and I was so scared that if I asked questions, they would kick me out. I just wanted to be what she wanted me to be." Marla looked like she had been slapped. Her allies were gone. Her narrative was ash. She spun around to face the audience, her hands shaking. "She is lying," Marla pleaded to the crowd. "My own children. They are conspiring against me. After everything I did, I gave them life." "Mrs. Westbrook." The voice came from the front table. Mr. Henderson, the senior compliance officer from the Hawthorne Foundation, stood up. He wasn't holding a champagne glass. He was holding a microphone that Dana had handed him. "Mrs. Westbrook?" Mr. Henderson said, his voice grave and authoritative. "I have the original file here. We have verified the IP addresses and the signatures with forensic experts this afternoon. Ms. Karina Westbrook is telling the truth. The Foundation has been defrauded." That was the nail in the coffin. A CEO daughter might be dismissed as vengeful. But the Foundation, that was institutional fact. Marla staggered back. She looked small suddenly. The regal matriarch had dissolved, leaving behind a terrified, greedy woman in a silver dress. Marla stammered. "I did it for the family. You don't understand poverty. You don't understand what it is like to have one child who can survive anything and one who needs help. I was being a mother." "You were being a thief," I said into the microphone. Suddenly, there was a commotion at the back of the ballroom. The heavy double doors swung open with a bang that made people jump. A figure stood in the doorway. He was wearing a suit that was 20 years out of style, ill-fitting and frayed at the cuffs. He looked out of place among the tuxedos and gowns. He looked terrified. It was my father, Gordon Westbrook. He never went to events. He never left Briar Hollow. Yet there he was, clutching a brown paper bag in his hands, breathing hard as if he had run all the way from the airport. "Gordon," Marla whispered. The color drained from her face completely. My father walked down the center aisle. The crowd parted for him, sensing the gravity of his presence. He didn't look at the audience. He didn't look at the screen. He only looked at me. He walked all the way to the edge of the stage. He reached into the paper bag and pulled out a crumpled, yellowed envelope. It had been taped back together, but the Hawthorne crest was still visible. He held it up to me. His hand was shaking violently. "I found it," Gordon said. His voice was weak, barely carrying to the stage, but the room was so silent, a pin drop would have sounded like a gunshot. "I found it in the trash can in the garage 11 years ago, the day she told you you were rejected." Marla gasped. You kept it." Gordon ignored her. He looked at me, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I fished it out. I read it. I saw that you got in. I saw that you got the full ride. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. My voice finally cracked. This was the question that had haunted me more than the theft. Where was my father? I was a coward, Gordon said, lowering his head. She told me if I said anything, she would leave me. She said she would take the girls and I would never see you again. She said it was better this way. That you were strong enough to make it on your own. He placed the envelope on the edge of the stage, like an offering at an altar. I kept it in my toolbox, he whispered. Under the wrenches, every day for 11 years, I looked at it, and every day I hated myself a little more. He looked up at Marla, and for the first time in my life, I saw something other than fear in his eyes. I saw disgust. I am done, Marla, Gordon said. I am not covering for you anymore. I took the bus here. I brought the proof. The room was paralyzed. The tragedy of it, the weak father, the manipulator mother, the broken sister was Shakespearean in its scope. I looked at the envelope on the stage, the physical manifestation of my lost life. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to read it. I had written a new life. I looked down at my father. I could have screamed at him. I could have told him that his silence hurt me more than Marla's lies because he was supposed to protect me. But looking at him now, a broken man in a cheap suit who had finally found a scrap of courage, I felt only exhaustion. You are late, Dad, I said softly into the microphone. 11 years later, Gordon flinched as if I had hit him. But, I added, at least you came. I turned away from him. I turned away from Delaney, who was sobbing into her hands. I turned to Marla. She was standing alone in the center of the stage. The spotlight was still on her, but it wasn't illuminating a star anymore. It was interrogating a criminal. Dana Rourke stepped out of the shadows from the side of the stage. She walked up to me, her face calm and professional amidst the emotional carnage. She leaned in close to my ear, but her voice was audible enough for Marla to hear. We have the confession on tape from upstairs, Dana said. We have the witness testimony from your sister. We have the physical evidence from your father, and we have the foundation statement. Dana paused, looking at Marla with cold, legal detachment. It is enough. Karina, Dana said. The police are waiting in the lobby. It is time for the final step. I nodded. I looked at Marla one last time. She was opening and closing her mouth, trying to find a lie that would work, trying to find a manipulation that would stick. But there were no words left. The audience wasn't looking at her with admiration. They were looking at her with revulsion. I told you, Mother, I said, my voice low and final. I told you I would give you a stage. I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a heavy thud that signaled the end of the show. I turned and walked off the stage, leaving them there, the mother, the sister, the father trapped in the spotlight I had bought for them, while the sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, getting louder and louder. The silence that followed the drop of the microphone was not empty. It was heavy, pressurized, the kind of silence that exists inside a submarine right before the hull breaches. I stood at the edge of the stage, my arms at my sides, watching the wreckage of the Westbrook family smolder under the stage lights. Dana Rourke did not give the audience time to recover. She signaled to Mr. Henderson, the compliance officer from the Hawthorne Foundation. He stepped forward, bypassing Marla to stand directly in front of the gathered press photographers. He held a blue legal folder in his hands. Mrs. Westbrook, Mr. Henderson said. His voice was not amplified by a microphone, but in the dead quiet of the ballroom, it carried to the back rows. On behalf of the Hawthorne Foundation, I am serving you with a formal notice of investigation regarding the misappropriation of funds and the falsification of academic records. He extended the folder. Marla stared at it as if it were a venomous snake. We have already contacted the district attorney's office in North Carolina, Mr. Henderson continued, his tone devoid of pity. Given the interstate nature of the wire transfers and the involvement of federal student aid data, this is no longer just a civil matter. It is a federal case. We are demanding full restitution of the $24,000 in stipend money, plus interest and legal fees. Furthermore, we are rescinding Delaney Westbrook's degree status pending a review by the University Ethics Board. Marla flinched as if she had been physically struck. You can't do that. She graduated. You can't take it back. We can, Mr. Henderson said. And we will. Marla looked around frantically. She looked at the audience, but the faces that had been beaming at her 20 minutes ago were now twisted in judgment and shock. People were physically recoiling, stepping back from the stage as if failure and fraud were contagious diseases. Marla spun toward Delaney. She grabbed my sister's shoulders, her fingers digging into the silk of that expensive dress. Delaney, do something, Marla hissed, her voice rising to a shriek. Cry? Tell them you are the victim here. Tell them you didn't know anything. Make them feel sorry for you. Faint, do something. It was the old playbook. Perform, Delaney. Be the fragile flower so Mommy can be the protector. But Delaney did not faint. She stood rigid, her eyes red and swollen, looking at the woman who had engineered her entire existence. No, Delaney said. Her voice was flat. What did you say to me? Marla demanded, shaking her. I said no. Delaney said louder. She shoved Marla's hands off her shoulders. I am done playing the victim, Mom. I am done playing the star. I am just done. Marla gasped, stumbling back. She looked at Delaney with betrayal. Then her eyes snapped to me. The fear in her face evaporated, replaced by a pure, concentrated hatred. She marched across the stage toward me, ignoring the legal papers Mr. Henderson was still holding. Are you happy now? Marla screamed, pointing a trembling finger at my chest. Look at what you did. You destroyed your sister's life. You destroyed my reputation. And for what? You are a billionaire. Karina, you have the company. You have the money. You have everything. What more could you possibly want from us? I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had looked me in the eye when I was 18 and told me I wasn't lucky enough to succeed. I want the truth to stand in the right place, I said. My voice was calm, contrasting sharply with her hysteria. I didn't destroy your reputation, Marla, I continued. I just corrected the record. You built your name on a foundation of theft. All I did was pull out the loose brick. Family. Gordon's voice cracked from the edge of the stage. My father climbed up the stairs. He looked old and defeated, clutching the railing for support. He walked between me and Marla, holding his hands up in a gesture of surrender. Karina, please, Gordon begged, tears streaming down his face. This is too much. The police, the courts. We don't need to do that. We can handle this internally. We can work out a payment plan. Please, baby, let the family resolve this. I looked at my father, the man who had found the letter in the trash and left it there for a decade. The family already resolved it, Dad, I said, cold as ice. The family resolved it by taking my future and giving it to Delaney. The family resolved it by cashing checks in my name. You had 11 years to handle this internally. You didn't. I gestured to the lawyers and the security guards who were now moving toward the stage. Now, I said. It is the law's turn. Gordon lowered his head, sobbing into his hands. He knew I was right. There was no argument left to make. The flashbulbs from the press pit were blinding now. Every second of this disintegration was being captured in high definition. I saw the gala organizers huddled in the corner, looking horrified. They had wanted a memorable night. They got one. Delaney suddenly collapsed. She didn't faint. Her legs simply gave out under the weight of the lie she had been carrying. She fell to her knees on the hardwood stage, burying her face in her hands. I knew, Delaney wailed. The sound was raw, a guttural confession that silenced the murmurs in the room. She looked up at me, mascara streaking down her face. I knew. Karina, she choked out. I suspected it the whole time, but I was so scared. I was scared that if I wasn't the Hawthorne scholar, I was nothing. Mom made me feel like without the praise, I didn't exist. I was jealous of you because you didn't need the applause to survive. And I was terrified to ask you because I knew if I admitted it, I would lose everything. It was the most honest thing Delaney had ever said. It didn't excuse the theft. It didn't excuse the entitlement, but it was the truth. You have lost everything now, Delaney, I said softly. But at least what you have left is actually yours. Dana stepped forward. She placed a document on the podium, right next to the microphone Marla had abused earlier. Mrs. Westbrook, Dana said sharply. The police are in the lobby. However, my client is willing to offer a recommendation of leniency regarding the civil pursuit of assets if you sign this admission of guilt immediately. It confirms that you acted alone in the forgery and that Karina Westbrook had no knowledge of the scheme. Dana uncapped a heavy black fountain pen and set it down. If you sign, Dana said, Karina will not push for the maximum sentencing recommendation on the fraud charges. If you do not sign, we will spend every penny of her considerable resources ensuring the book is thrown at you so hard you never see the sun again. Marla looked at the pen. She looked at the police officers waiting by the exit. She looked at her friends in the audience who were now turning their backs on her. She walked to the podium. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the pen. She looked at me one last time. There was no remorse in her eyes. There was only the bitter, toxic glare of a narcissist who had been unmasked. She didn't hate herself for what she did. She hated me for catching her. You are a cold, heartless girl, Marla whispered as she leaned over the paper. I learned from the best, I replied. Marla scribbled her signature. It was jagged and angry. Tearing through the paper, Dana snatched the document up immediately. Checking the signature, she nodded to me. It is done. Get them out of here, I said. Security moved in. 2 large men in black suits flanked Marla. Another helped Delaney to her feet. Gordon followed them, trailing behind like a shadow. The walk of shame was long. They had to cross the entire length of the ballroom to get to the exit. The crowd parted for them, creating a wide berth. No one spoke. The only sound was the clicking of cameras and the uneven clatter of heels on the marble floor. Marla tried to keep her head up, but the weight of the stairs crushed her posture. Delaney just looked at the floor. I stood at the edge of the stage, watching them go. I didn't feel a surge of joy. I didn't feel a rush of dopamine. I just felt light. For 11 years, I had been carrying the weight of a question, why wasn't I good enough? Now, the question is gone. I wasn't the one who lacked worth. I was just the one they had tried to break because I was too strong to be controlled. They reached the double doors. The police officers were waiting. I saw the flash of blue lights from the patrol cars outside reflecting against the glass. The doors swung shut behind them, cutting off the view. The room remained silent for a heartbeat longer. Then, slowly, someone in the back started to clap. Then another person. It wasn't polite applause. It was the applause of respect. I didn't acknowledge it. I didn't bow. I looked at the empty spot where Marla had stood. I looked at the screen where the proof of my victory was still glowing. I picked up the microphone one last time. Enjoy your dinner, I said. I turned and walked off the stage. I walked past Dana, past the stunned organizers, and out the side exit into the cool night air of Virginia. I took a deep breath. The air didn't smell like orchids and old money out here. It smelled like rain and asphalt. It smelled like reality. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I had a merger to close. I had a company to run. I had a life to live that was entirely, undeniably mine. I looked at the reflection in my phone screen. The girl looking back wasn't the twin who got left behind. She wasn't the daughter who slept in a garage. She was the architect of her own justice. My mom swapped my scholarship letter for my twin sister. Now I'm CEO of a $1.9 billion company, and I watched them lose it all. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please comment below with your city or country, so we can say hello. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to the Veronica Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to us.